The Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program is a homegrown, Barbadian-led effort aimed at reducing debt, spurring growth, and improving our fiscal sustainability. The main planks of the strategy are broadening the tax base, streamlining expenditure, and the reformation and modernization of the civil service, particularly state-owned enterprises. Dr. Kevin Greenidge, Senior Economist at the International Monetary Fund and now member of the Barbados Economic Team, explained the seriousness of the current economic situation.
I will have to say we have the perfect economic storm. You had one of the highest debt, we've had one of the highest debt to GDP ratios in the world, second to Japan, who have a lot of reserves to back that, and Greece. So we had debt to GDP in terms, what that really means is that if, for a person, when you get paid, you got expenses, etc. If total debt that you have is relative to the income you earn, that's the GDP. If that's 100%, it means 100% of your debt out there is more than income, and of course, it means you got to service that debt. So it's kind of a measure of your indebtedness. And the problem with it is that when you have too high a debt, then you have to take money from your revenue, or in our individual case, your earnings, and service that debt. It means that money is not available to do other things like development. So you get a deterioration in the infrastructure. We've seen that. You get, the roads infrastructure. We know about the critical things the Prime Minister said she would have done, like the storage system. There's a deterioration because much of your money is going to service that debt. That was the one. We have had almost zero. So that's first. Not talking about how we got in there, but can tell you the problem, the measure, the severity of it. Then you've had no economic growth over the last decade, really, since the financial crisis, averaging from zero. Now, that is within the margin error, right? Literally, the economy has not grown for the last how much years? And you need to grow. If you're not growing, your debt getting worse. Persons are not, the economy is just, again, going down. Then in terms of government finances, we have had deficits averaging 6-7% for a while. It means your expenditures is outpacing your income. And when that happens, what you have to do? Get more debt to service that. And when we look at this, so high debt, terrible fiscal situation, and absence of growth it doesn't get much worse than that. And when you look at the fiscal, a large part of it have been in the SOEs, transfer SOEs, and in terms of, so that's the main part. And the wage bill and the expenditure, the interest bill. That is why we had to fix it. And at the same time, the manifestation of all of this is that you have no reserves. You're not earning anything. So our reserves dwindled to, in the papers I saw, 420 or 4 or 5 weeks. You need 4 or 5 months in case anything happens, right? And just a service. So this is the problem.
The team has noted that many state-owned enterprises have grown over time. Their spending rose and inefficiencies crept in.
Prime Minister will say, we now have to become fit for purpose, which means we can't go where we need to go with the same sort of structure we had before. And so we will be doing diagnostics of this. The Prime Minister have already started that. There was this online survey which had an amazing response rate, 5,000 people. These Barbadians show interest in responding. And so you would need technical assistance in certain areas as you start to diagnose it.
The solution is three-pronged: reduce fiscal expenditure and debt, and foster growth.
You have to do a thorough examination of this and see how can we improve that, restructure, retool in a way that you empower and enfranchise persons. It means that, you can always find ways to do things much better. We know the inefficiencies in different areas. It doesn't mean that you have to get rid. What you have to do is thoroughly diagnose the problem, which is what is being done, and come up with a framework. Because if one person leaves an institution and be employed somewhere else in the private sector, or you understand, the way you have to do it, and the framework, the approach to it is one where the government is looking that when you restructure and retool, you are actually empowering persons to be able to provide their own services in some cases, and enfranchise them that they're actually contributing to economic growth. So it's not about, I've heard talk about cut 4,000, You can go to the doctor with a problem and he can cut off a foot, you know. It doesn't mean that that's the foot that good. You understand what I'm saying? Cutting is not the way. You have to really diagnose the situation. And you might realize that when you do this, the gains to be made and you can minimum casualty or minimal loss, right? So it's not, and this is what the government is doing, committed discussion with social partnership and all involved to see exactly where efficiencies can be gained. The bottom is you have to become fit for purpose. I'm borrowing the Prime Minister's phrase exactly. Other countries are here to call it fiscal fitness. We can't go where we are doing the way we used to do. We're in the 21st century, right? We have to use the technologies much more. You know, we have to become more competitive in what we're doing, right? So it doesn't mean cutting. That's not what it is about.
As government seeks to manage its debt, it must also manage debt owed by state-owned enterprises. Governor of the Central Bank, Cleviston Haynes, noted that this has been included in the debt restructuring program.
What is probably little known is that some of the transfers which the enterprises have been receiving over time is really to enable them to service debt which they would have gone out and got from commercial entities. So their debt has to be brought into the overall debt restructuring. Secondly, as I said earlier, the program envisages that we will reduce arrears, and reducing the arrears means that we also have to reduce the arrears of the state-owned enterprises, some of which might be to the NAS. And so there will be a program for the reduction in the arrears. One of the things that we will find is that to the extent that the central government, for example, did not pass on funds to enterprises, it might have meant that some enterprises were unable, or as a result, some enterprises accumulated arrears. It's not a one-to-one situation, but in some cases, so that once we are in a position to be able to fund the central government such that it can pass those funds on to the enterprises, then we will actually liquidate two sets of arrears at the same time, what the central government owes the enterprises and what the enterprises actually owes to the private sector. So those are the ways in which we hope to be able to eliminate arrears, because you're not going to have, we can't have a situation where we have the arrears out there and say that we've formally reached stability. What we're going to have is a program for their elimination, and then we will try to meet that program such that it does not impair, and we have to have balance here. It has to be consistent with the available financial resources, because we just can't say, well, we're going to pay off all the arrears one time if you don't have the financial resources so to do. So it will have to be phased, but in so doing, it will be eliminated.
The Central Bank of Barbados recently made an offer to individuals who hold treasury bills and notes and debentures. This also includes some state-owned enterprises and corporations. Chief of Communications at the Central Bank, Noveline Brewster, recently spoke with Acting Deputy Governor Michelle Doyle Lowe about the offer.
Firstly, explain for us why this debt exchange offer.
Well, we have a combination of challenging economic circumstances that really require meaningful action and a response that is comprehensive. And the debt exchange is one element of that response. So if you look across the board in terms of what we've experienced in recent time, we've been plagued by declining reserves, and these are reserves that we need to service our imports and maintain our standard of living. Combined with that, we have the reality of large fiscal deficits that have to be financed, and on occasion they have been financed by central bank financing and support, and that has really sort of demonstrated how cash-strapped government has been of late, which also resulted in accumulated arrears. So tax refunds not being paid, which is something that we have all experienced in one form or the next, and that translated into a debt level that ballooned up to 157% of GDP. So these combination of factors resulted in our current reality, which is not sustainable and where we have to take immediate action to address the reality.
And to help us better manage our expenditure going forward.
Indeed, exactly.
So, Michelle, which debt is included in this offer?
Well, in terms of the affected debt, you're really looking at all treasury bills, all treasury notes and debentures, whether they're held by individuals or corporates. And in addition to that, any loans or state-owned enterprise debt is also included with regard to eligible instruments for the debt offer. What is excluded are savings bonds. So savings bonds as instruments held by individuals or any other non-government entity are not included in the exchange offer.
Help us to understand in simple language the structure and the mechanics of the offer.
Right. Well, the first thing that is the most important for any creditor is that we are not faced with a haircut or a reduction in the principal holdings of these instruments. The other critical thing to note is that the interests on the instruments as well as the structure of the offerings differ for particular groups. So, for example, for private individuals and for pensioners, what is targeted there relates to instruments that are of a maturity of 15 years, where the interests on these structures are in step-ups, so that you start with a low interest rate of 1% and over time that increases to 3.75. Now, the amount that will be reflected on the new instruments that I'm describing will be a combination of the principal amount that you invested as well as the accrued interests on those existing securities up to September 30th. So that will all be rolled into the new instrument, which will then be divided across what is called 11 strips, so that there are set maturities within the offering, whereby the amount that you would have held previously will now be divided for set periods of 5 years, 6 years, and the like, going out to 15 years. The other critical thing to understand, especially for pensioners, is that there is the preservation of the withholding tax exemption, as well as the fact that the repayment of the principal amount, unlike private individuals where they have the first maturity being in 5 years, for pensioners from the end of next year, they will be receiving their amortization payments.
This requires an example, Michelle. Walk us through.
Okay.
I am an investor. My consolidated holdings amount to $100,000.
Right.
Explain the different payments.
So let's assume that $100,000 is scheduled to earn you $3,000 in interest at the end of this month, so the end of September. That aggregate amount of $103,000 will now be rolled into the new instrument. Within the new instrument, you have interest payments becoming due within 3 months' time. So every quarter, you will be receiving an interest payment, unlike the previous securities that were structured to receive interest every 6 months. So the frequency of your interest payments will increase, so that at the end of this year, you will receive interest of $257.50, and again at the end of March next year. Now, with regard to the amortizing structure within the new instrument, as a pensioner, you will now receive at the end of December 2019 an amount of $3,168.29. Reason being, across the 11 strips that I would have mentioned previously, you will be amortizing an amount related to each of those strips, which will be payable at the end of next year. And similarly so for private individuals, they will start to receive amortization payments after 4 years.
What advice can you give investors to encourage them to accept this offer, or to show them the benefits of accepting this offer?
Well, I think we have to look at the reality that would be faced by a person who does not accept the offer for whatever reason. The first one being the level of uncertainty they will face with regard to the repayment of the principal amount that they would have originally invested, as well as any interest payment that would have been due to them. It is uncertain how that will be serviced and when. The second and more critical part relates to the fact that it will put the country in a position whereby there would be a protracted debt exchange, and that translates into a reality of the entire restructuring process. So not just the debt exchange, but what we're hoping to achieve to reposition the debt portfolio as well as the broader economy. All of that becomes questionable if we're not able to successfully complete the debt exchange. So really and truly it is within the national interest for us to be able to complete this debt exchange in a timely fashion, and for us to focus on the growth enhancing initiatives that need to gain traction in order to transform our economic circumstance. So all of these elements are really tied into us being successful coming out of this endeavor and repositioning the economy to a brighter and better Barbados.
And the sacrifice will be worth it at the end of the
And
day.
the sacrifice has to be a shared burden. So many individuals have asked, why is it that they are part of this? And the reality is that beyond institutional investors, beyond our contribution with regard to the fiscal measures that have been introduced, there is need for all of us to share the heavy lifting, let's say. And certainly, as would have been announced previously, our external creditors have not been left out of this as well. So they too will have to contribute to the reform that is targeted, but it's really a case of us having a comprehensive approach that allows for that burden sharing.
And how do we as investors go about accepting the offer, and what other assistance will the Central Bank of Barbados be extending to us outside of this forum today?
Right. Well, persons by now should have hopefully received the letters that would have been distributed to creditors outlining the exchange offer. And within that, there would have been a tender form which parties need to utilize and complete in order to indicate their acceptance of the offer and to identify for us whether they're a pensioner, their banking details, and how we can contact them going forward. The Central Bank, of course, and all of our staff stand ready to assist in terms of providing information and to help persons complete the relevant documentation. Beyond submitting the tender form to the Central Bank, parties are also encouraged to submit their physical certificates, because we are simultaneously migrating from physical issuance of securities to a dematerialized form where you will now be receiving a security statement to confirm your holding rather than having a certificate. And some persons are glad to hear that, especially those who would have previously misplaced certificates and had to go through the process of replacing them. So this presents us with an opportunity to migrate to a book entry system, and also to ensure that we have all of your payment details up to date so that you will be receiving all of your payments in direct credit to your bank account.
I'm here today. I don't have my offer letter on me. Is it possible to get a copy of that? And if I did not bring my certificates, I can bring them another time.
At another date, yes.
Okay.
But what is important is that even if you don't have your order form and you need to have a copy printed and you come to the bank, it will be provided, but we do need to receive that tender order form by Friday, October 5th, 5 p.m., which is the cutoff for the existing offer. And if you need to then bring your physical certificate subsequent to that date, that is fine as well.
Thank you to Mrs. Doyle Lowe, Ms. Brewster, and Dr. Greenidge. And we hope that you learned something more about the current economic situation and the restructuring of the domestic debt. And of course, we'll continue to keep you updated on things as they progress with our economic situation. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.
You can find more government information by visiting our website, gisbarbados.gov.bb. Like and follow us on these social media platforms under the handle GIS Barbados, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, the BGIS.